Imagine this. It's 1996. A mother named Linda is standing in her kitchen. There's no delivery app buzzing on the counter, no pantry full of protein bars pretending to be health food, no cereal box with a cartoon animal trying to convince her child that dessert is now breakfast. There's a skillet on the stove, maybe meatloaf in the oven, green beans on the side. Nothing fancy, nothing optimized, no macros, no meal prep influencer telling Linda to place chicken in 7 identical containers, like she's feeding a bodybuilding army. Just dinner. And outside, her kids are riding bikes, playing tag, and burning off energy until the streetlights come on. When mom yells their full government name from the porch, everybody knows the investigation is over. Somebody is in trouble. Now let's fast forward. Same kind of woman, same age, same desire to be healthy. Let's call her Lisa. Lisa wakes up tired after scrolling in bed until midnight. She skips breakfast or grabs a sweet coffee drink that has more calories than Linda's entire lunch. At work, there's a vending machine, snacks in the break room, and a coworker named Carol who keeps bringing donuts like she works for the insulin resistance department. Lunch comes from a drive-thru. Dinner comes from an app. And at 9:30 at night, her phone whispers, "Would you like fries with your stress?" So here's the question. Did Linda have more willpower than Lisa? Or did Linda live in a world that made willpower less necessary? Because this video is not about blaming people. This is a metabolic crime scene investigation. And the victim is American metabolism. Exhibit A comes from the CDC NCHS report by Fryer and colleagues. Prevalence of overweight, obesity, and severe obesity among adults aged 20 and older. In 1997 to 1994, adult obesity was about 14.5%. In 1996 to 1980, it was about 15%. Today, it's around 40%. That is not a small change. That is not my pants shrunk in the dryer. That is a national metabolic earthquake. And genetics did not change that fast. Human DNA did not wake up in 1985 and say, from now on, everybody gets a spare tire. So if your genes didn't change, the environment did. And our first clue is the kitchen. In Linda's world, food mostly came from ingredients, not perfect food. Let's not pretend the 1970s were a metabolic Garden of Eden. People smoked more. Margarine was treated like it deserved a medical degree. And some casseroles looked like somebody lost a wrestling match with cream of mushroom soup. But meals had boundaries. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe dessert, maybe a snack. Food had a beginning and end. Today, food has no off switch. You can find food at the gas station, pharmacy, hardware store, clothing store, and probably soon at the dentist. Congratulations, your cleaning is done. Would you like a cinnamon roll? But the real change wasn't just access. It was engineering. Exhibit B comes from Wolfson and colleagues. Trends in adults' intake of unprocessed or minimally processed and ultra-processed foods. At home and away from home in the United States from 2003 to 2018. They found ultra-processed food make up more than half of the American adult's energy intake. Then the CDC NCHS data brief number 536, ultra-processed food consumption in the United States, August 2021 through August 23, found Americans consumed about 55% of calories from ultra-processed foods. That means more than half the average diet is coming from foods designed, packaged, and flavored, and marketed to keep you eating. Ultra-processed food is not just food with extra steps. It's food with a business plan. Refined starch, sugar, industrial oils, salt, flavorings, crunch, creaminess, a texture that disappears fast enough to make your brain say, wait, did we even eat? This is not normal satiety. This is appetite hijacking. Your body is looking for nourishment. Your brain is getting stimulation. And your hormones are left cleaning up the mess like the janitor after a middle school food fight. That brings us to clue number 2. The drink changed. In Linda's world, soda existed. Sugar existed. Dessert existed. But sugar was more of an event. Today, sugar is background noise. It's in drinks, sauces, yogurts, breakfast foods, granola bars, coffee drinks, and foods labeled made with real fruit. Made with real fruit can mean almost anything. That's like me saying I'm in the NBA because I once touched a basketball at the YMCA. Exhibit C comes from Hurt and colleagues. Decreased consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. Improved selected biomarkers of chronic disease risk among U.S. adults 1999 to 2010. The paper notes. Sugar-sweetened beverage intake increased greatly from the late 1970s into the early 2000s. Added sugar from these drinks were estimated around 59 grams per day in the late 1970s and reached about 100 grams per day around 1999 to 2000. That matters because liquid sugar is sneaky. It doesn't fill you up like real food. It hits quickly. It drives glucose and insulin. And for many people, over time, that contributes to fatty liver, insulin resistance, cravings, and hunger that feels like it has its own personality. Soda wasn't just a drink. For many people, it became a liquid delivery system for metabolic dysfunction. Clue number 3, the oils changed. Exhibit D comes from the USDA Economic Research Service report by Bentley. U.S. Trends in Food Availability and a Dietary Assessment of Lost Suggested Food Availability 1970 to 2014. Per person, availability of added fats and oils rose from 52.5 pounds per year in 1970 to 82.2 pounds in 2010. That's a 57% increase. And salad and cooking oils rose dramatically. Now, I am not saying one drop of seed oil turns you into a pumpkin, but when refined starch, sugar, and added oils come together inside ultra-processed food, you get the perfect metabolic storm. High calorie density, low nutrient density, low satiety, high reward. That combination is like giving your metabolism a Rubik's Cube, turning off the lights, and then asking why it's confused. Clue number 4, the clock change. Linda ate meals. Lisa grazes. And modern food companies love grazing because grazing turns your entire day into a checkout line. Exhibit E comes from the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee Scientific Report, Part D, Chapter 6. Frequency of meals and or snacking. It found 86% of adults report at least one snack per day. Snacks contribute about 23% of daily energy intake and 43% of daily added sugars for adults. That is not a snack. That is a second diet hiding between meals. And metabolically, this matters. Every time we eat, especially refined carbohydrates and sugar, insulin rises. Insulin is not bad. Insulin is essential. But when insulin is elevated too often, the body spends more time storing energy and less time accessing stored body fat. The body never gets the message. Kitchen closed, time to burn stored fat. Instead it hears, another snack. Wonderful. We remain open for business, and business is booming. Clue number 5, the movement disappeared. The 1970s did not have the same gym culture we have today, but daily life had movement built in. Kids played outside, people walked more, jobs were more physical, chores required more effort. Nobody needed a smartwatch to congratulate them for standing up. Exhibit F comes from Borodilin and colleagues. 30-year trends of physical activity in relation to age. Calendar time and birth cohorts in Finnish adults. They found leisure time exercise increased, but physically demanding work dropped significantly. That is the modern paradox. We have more exercise culture, but less movement culture. A 45-minute workout is great, but it cannot fully erase 10 hours of sitting, poor sleep, constant snacking, and a food environment designed by people who know exactly how to make you crave more. And then came the final clue. The night changed. Linda went to bed without a glowing rectangle telling her about politics, celebrity drama, and one more recipe she had no intention of making. Lisa goes to bed with a phone, blue light, stress, emails, notifications, one more episode, one more scroll. And sleep deprivation does not just make you tired, it changes hunger. The Stanford Lifestyle Medicine article, How Sleep Deprivation Affects Your Metabolic Health, summarizes research showing short sleep can increase ghrelin, the hunger hormone, and decrease leptin, the satiety hormone. So after a bad night of sleep, your body says, you are tired, hungry, stressed, and less satisfied. Would you like emotional support nachos? That is not weakness. That is biology. And this is where the whole case comes together. The 1970s were not magical. People had problems. Food was not perfect. Health advice was not perfect, but the world had metabolic guardrails. Meals had structure. Snacks were less constant. Food was less engineered. Portions were smaller. Movement was built into life. Sleep had fewer digital enemies. Today, Lisa is not fighting one thing. She is fighting an entire system. Ultra-processed food, liquid sugar, constant snacking, bigger portions, less movement, poor sleep, more stress, more cravings, more insulin, more leptin resistance, more fatigue, and less fat burning. So no, America did not simply lose discipline. America lost its metabolic guardrails. And once those guardrails disappeared, the body did exactly what biology told it to do. It adapted. It stored energy. It protected itself. It became hungrier. It became more resistant to weight loss. And then we blamed the person. That is the tragedy. And here is the good news. You do not have to live in 1976. I like GPS, air conditioning, indoor plumbing, and not having to unfold a paper map while arguing with my wife about whether we missed the exit. We do not need to go backwards. We need to bring back the metabolic advantages. Eat real meals. Prioritize protein. Stop drinking sugar. Reduce ultra-processed foods. Make snacks intentional, not automatic. Cook more often. Move throughout the day, protect sleep like it's a prescription, and build a home environment where your future self does not have to fight a cage match with cookies every night. Because the goal is not to prove you have more willpower than a bag of chips. The goal is to stop putting yourself in a daily battle with foods designed to defeat willpower. People were not leaner in the 1970s because they were morally superior. They lived in a world that made metabolic health easier. Today, we live in a world that makes metabolic dysfunction profitable. And once you understand that, you stop blaming yourself and you start rebuilding your environment because your body is not broken. Your biology is responding. And when you change the inputs, you can change the outcome. So comment below. What changed the most since the 1970s? The food, the movement, the stress, the sleep, or all the above? And if this helped you understand obesity through a metabolic lens, like this video, subscribe, and check the description and playlist for more videos on how to protect your metabolism in a world that keeps trying to hijack it. I'll see you in the next video.